Hello and welcome back, and that is right, we've got Ed Rawlins, Space Invader 1. You've been to that YouTube channel before, and today we want to talk about UnRAID 7, the beta. It came out a few days ago at the time of recording, and I'm going to let you behind the curtain a little bit. I was planning a video on this. I was planning on putting a little unit together there and going through some of the features. I've got my little notes here, all on the left-hand side of the screen, and then this guy did a much better video. He didn't just do a better video, he then poured salt into the wound by doing an AI wrap. And if you haven't heard it yet, it's linked in the description.
Mover tools got your tricks. It can clear an entire disk. Reformat from riser fast without taking a risk.
UnRAID 7 tier, no more CTM. All the latest features, we've got the best of them.
It is annoyingly catchy and good, and I hate him and it. But I digress. Ed is here to walk us through some of the highlights of UnRAID 7, because frankly, he'll do a better job of it than me. For me, my big highlights on the platform, real utilization of the ZFS feature set. You've been able to use UnRAID without an active UnRAID pool straight out the gate. Those sub-storage areas of ZFS as well, pinned favorites, the idea you can customize the GUI. All of this will be covered in the video alongside hopefully some of those power controls and the abundance of things that have been rolled in with VM support there. But Ed, I'm going to kind of hand over to you and sit here on the fence in the background. What exactly is UnRAID 7, the beta? I'm going to keep saying that like it's electric boogaloo. What is it bringing to the table?
Well, before we start, Robbie, I just want to say thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction there.
Nope.
Yeah, so UnRAID 7, obviously, from the name of it, it's a very, very big release because it's going from 6 to 7. I believe UnRAID 6 came out probably, I think, 2014, 2015. So this is a very big leap from going from 6 to 7. So one of the biggest features of UnRAID 7 is we've now got full ZFS implementation in the OS. We did have ZFS in UnRAID 6. In the latter versions of 6, I think it was from UnRAID 6.10 onwards, but we didn't have full ZFS implementation such as sub VDEVs like L2 Arc and Slog. But now we do have that. But for people that want to run ZFS, one of the biggest features, I think, is the fact that you don't actually have to have an UnRAID array at all. So everything in 7 is basically a pool. So the UnRAID array, that is a type of pool where you can expand it, adding drives of mixed match size drives, growing it as your storage needs move forward. But I think it's really important to say, there is such a, there's such a focus on not having an array and the ZFS implementation. The UnRAID array is such an awesome feature that you can actually add drives in. And I think sometimes people, when there's a new feature that comes out, they so kind of focus on that they think, oh, I want to get rid of my old UnRAID array, convert everything to ZFS. But, everything is a tool and you use the right tool for the job. Yeah, so
I was going to mention, with the ZFS implementation, we talked about that on some videos we did last year, and it was such a draw for a lot of users to hop on with UnRAID. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And the UnRAID array is still very, very useful, the sheer length and breadth of it as well, and the way you can mix and match a lot of those drives because of the single drive utilization factor and that mathematics that goes into the back end. But it must have been a tough decision, I imagine, in during development for them to effectively say in UnRAID, okay, we'll allow you to use our software without our arrays there. I know I was doing some early videos on the Zimmer Cube system. I did some UnRAID testing on that. And it was actually something of a ball ache that I couldn't just go straight into the ZFS to show off some of that system. And I can see lots of users now are going to be far more drawn to UnRAID with that focus potentially shifting so heavily to ZFS. And now you're utilizing the length and breadth of ZFS's feature set. And particularly that sub-pool stuff that I'd like to talk about as well. I think it is nothing but a positive for UnRAID to be able to allow users to focus squarely and surely on those ZFS pools.
Well, it's all about choice, Robbie. So what Lime Technology have done is they've given us the choice to have our servers how we want it to be. So if you want a mixture of an UnRAID array and various Z pools, you can do that. If you only want Z pools, you can do that. If you only want an UnRAID array, you can do that. So we've just got, the more choice you have, the more freedom you have, and it's better for everyone. So that's my opinion on that.
I mean, and with the active pool, when you do have one up and running there, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on UnRAID 7 in the change in the graphical user interface and the customization of that as well. I mean, if you could lay us out maybe some of the improvements on that dashboard as well. We'll definitely come back to the storage, but I think for a lot of users that are still on the fence about moving towards UnRAID as their custom NAS OS of choice, I think a lot of the time there's always going to be that slight apprehension and concern over something, the steeper learning curve. And I've always said that UnRAID is one of the most user-friendly third-party NAS OSs in the market. So what improvements have been brought forward in that dashboard and the layout?
Right. Well, let's jump over onto one of my servers, Robbie. I'll bring it up here. This is my main server here. So I'm going to click onto the dashboard here. And we can see here, this is the UnRAID dashboard. Now, one thing I think is really good that's been improved is the system part of the dashboard here, where you can see the RAM, how much of your flash drive's used, how big the log is, and the Docker vdisk. So you can easily see your utilization. What's really nice here is the legend on the RAM. You can see here I'm using 29 gigs of RAM, and of that, I can see how much ZFS is using. It's using 6.35 gigabytes for its ARC cache. So it's really nice to be able to actually visually see how the RAM is actually split up. Just sort of scrolling through, you can see I've got various different widgets here.
The disk location bit there, that's very nice. I've not noticed that before.
Of my hard drives. But the good thing is you can just click onto this little icon at the top here, the padlock, and you can actually move things around how you want them to be. Another feature you'll see here is virtual machine usage. I've got this on the dashboard. You don't have to have it, but this one here, Pop! OS Quadro, is actually the VM that's running behind me. I'm not sure if you can see, or there's a monitor that's doing a matrix screensaver. That's a VM that's currently running this, and we can see how much guest CPU is being used, 11% guest, and the host is using 4%. So we can see the memory and network metrics as well, which is pretty nice. So the resolution on the screen is not great, so if this was a wider monitor, things would look.
Well, no, I was going to say it's still nice to have that visualization, that single portal interface there. And I think one of the things I remember when I first started using UnRAID on and off was about three and a bit years ago. Personally, I think it was just after the pandemic, and I was sort of playing around with different stuff. And what I always liked was just how informative the single dash was. And I think only TrueNAS and UnRAID really give you that amount of information, but even TrueNAS compartmentalized it. And I'm glad that we can move all this around, but with that favorites tab, this idea that you can choose to bolt things on to this main page at the options at the top as well is something I've not really seen on any other NAS brand. The ability to change that top menu there to the important things. I really like that feature as well, that customization, which again, we're looking at a single portal there. I mean, if you could walk us through some of the changes there on that top bar that you can apply.
Yeah, so on the top bar here, I've actually got some additional things that you don't see in the stock, which are some of my other servers here. Just sort of clicking onto them, it just goes through to them. But so that isn't in the stock, but it can be done by a plugin. But on the top bar, you'll see here there's this favorites toggle here. I'm just going to go back to the dashboard just one moment, actually, because I want to just mention the clock here. It seems kind of like, I don't know, people go, oh, I know what the time is. I've got my cell phone, and at the bottom of my screen on my computer, you've got a clock. But it's really nice to actually have the clock here, because I'm not sure how many people have ever been looking at their log files, trying to work something out, and they're thinking, I wasn't doing anything at 3 a.m. in the morning, that I didn't even think my server was on, because it's defaulted to the wrong time zone in Asgard, because you brought your server to Asgard once. and it's on
I was going to say the
Asgardian
number.
time.
You must have had similar support calls to this, because I know you're one of the official support on UnRAID there on the banker panels. Again, you should be linked below. You can hire Ed, but I do not a similar thing more generally for NAS over on Ko-Fi and Patreon. And sometimes people will hire me for a support call, and nothing seems to be working, and it does just come down to the time's wrong. They've not set it to NT people. And it's one of those moments you're on a live call with someone and you've had to say to them, yeah, your time's wrong. And that one thing, and I think it's massively overlooked how often the damage that can do to a system, be it for the network connection, and it's so many things run wrong with such a small detail. So I would go one further than you. It isn't just nice to see the time there. I'd want to know that if the time is wrong. That's why I like seeing it big. I just want to know if the time is wrong, because I've got a phone, I've got a watch, a pink watch, so it must be good. But I just want to know that the time is there, so I know it is wrong. So, one further, I just like that it's there to know that it's wrong.
And Robbie, I just want to go on a little side tangent here. I'm really sorry, everyone. Just talking about times being wrong, quite a weird thing that I discovered a couple of years ago is I use, like everyone does, like two-factor authentication, and you have the thing that generates the number. I use Bitwarden for mine, and just one day it wasn't working, and I was generating the numbers and I couldn't get into the site. So I was thinking, what is wrong? And what caused it to be wrong is my actual PC. The clocks had changed, and I think the time had either gone back or forward. I can't remember. And so because it's dependent on the actual time when the two-factor authentication codes are generated, it all stopped working. And I was really upset. I thought I couldn't get into all my favorite websites. And it was just because the time was incorrect on my PC. I put it to the right time, and then two-factor was then correct and generating the correct codes that then worked. So
I love the fact that there are people watching this. I know there's a degree of people watching this who are getting really annoyed how much we're talking about the time. I think there is another bunch of people that are all thinking of an occasion like the one you just described, be it that their scheduled on-off is completely knackered, their surveillance recordings are shafted beyond belief, their backup routines are running at inopportune moments and they can't turn them off because they didn't do a differential backup, an incremental, I should say, and it's the wrong time of day.
Exactly.
Like, I think we should end talking about the time, but I really hope if you are the person watching this and you felt the stab of a support call, or you had to deal with a dodgy server and it was just simply the time in 2024, let me know in the comments. But let's carry on. Wow, yeah.
Anyway, people who have used UnRAID before may be seeing here at the top, there's the favorites button here. And for all the people in the UK, yes, it is spelt differently to how we spell it. So, it's the American spelling, of course. So if we click onto that here, you can see I've got a few things that are put here, not very much at the moment. I've got like new configuration, system devices, update OS, and my users tab. But say I go across to the settings tab here, and I use Tailscale a lot, so I can click onto the heart on this one. That's added to the favorites. And other things I might want to use, ZFS master here, I can add that. I use user scripts a lot. I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to go onto the tools bar here. So I always used to find I would look for something in settings and it was in tools, and it was very frustrating, and vice versa. So now in tools, I can click on like new permissions, add that. I'm not sure if that was already added. It might have been. And say file activity here, I can add that. So now when I go back to the favorites, I don't, the things I use often are going to be displayed here. So I find that a really useful feature, and I use it on my servers to easily access things.
it's weirdly rare as well. I mean, again, I've dealt with a lot of different NAS operating systems, from turnkey to open source. It is weirdly rare how many of them let you create a shortcut to specific settings menus. And again, I know it seems like I'm praising something very, very small, and there's going to be people watching this that are thinking that. But seriously, take the time to look at different brands. It's a really overlooked feature, particularly when some brands will create a portal that goes towards the network and connections area of the system, but they won't let you have a straightforward one-click tab to, user account control, a one-click tab to the security manager. And these are really important things that I want to get to very, very fast, and also to monitor on the quick. So it's a small, but I would argue very necessary feature. And given that UnRAID is trying to really prioritize ease of use, I think this is a nice little extra, a little work that goes into that UX there. Let's have a look. So I'm looking at my list on other.
For people that don't want to use it, because obviously this top toolbar is screen real estate, you might not want to have that there. You might very rarely ever go to that, and you just don't want to have it. So you remove them off. I'll quickly do that. Sorry. Maybe let's switch across to another server. That's probably going to be easier. So you can see on this one here, I don't have the bar. So when it's not in use, then it isn't displayed. So going to settings here, if I just added Docker to my favorites, then the favorites appears. And you don't want it anymore, the favorites will go. So,
I was going to say, side note, talking of real estate, how many servers you got on the go there? And that's a bit rich coming from me, but man alive.
Too many.
I mean, this guy's visible from space. Okay, so another one of the points that was touched on both in the release notes and on your video, but it has not been spoken about too much elsewhere. The creating the movement of storage when you've got kind of empty disk arrays or moving data en masse or moved over. I hear that in UnRAID 7 that's been done a great deal easier.
Yeah, so you're talking about basically moving data from one share to another across different pools.
Yeah.
So let's go on to another server here. Let's go back to this one. See what we've got here. So this server, none of these are UnRAID arrays. They're all just single drives. As I didn't have enough NVMEs in this, I mainly use this for kind of VMs and that kind of thing. But what you can do now, you see, is you can choose where Mover moves data from. So when you create the share, for instance, if we were to add a new share now, and let's call it media. So we can choose the primary storage where the actual data will go to. So at the moment it's going to the Firefly pool here. But I could also, you can see obviously I can't choose the array because I don't have one. It's grayed out. I can't click onto that. But if I wanted it to go to, say, River as as the first pool, I can click that. If I was just to click add share now, it will only go to River. But if I wanted it to first go here, because it was a faster pool, then go to some kind of bulk storage afterwards, I can then choose the second pool where I want it to go to. So after River, it can go to Jamestown, and Mover will move it. And we can see the direction it's going to do it at the bottom.
And it's nice minimized options as well. I wish there was a few more kind of hint notes along the way, I think, for early users. But I do think the idea of having multiple pools and simplifying the migration of data between them.
Here. So anyway, that's how Mover has been improved to be able to actually move data from any pool you want to any pool you want.
And that recreation of data, I would say, or even like easy, fast, kind of one-click dupe there. Some of that extends, I would argue, to the way you guys have approached virtual machine deployment there. Because I know it's been made a lot easier now to just dupe and kind of easy snapshot creation in VMs. I think we really should sink our teeth into the virtual machine stuff now in UnRAID 7, right?
Yeah, for sure. So if I move on to the VMs tab here, there have been huge improvements done to the VMs here. Again, like the dashboard here, you can see my VM usage statistics here. There's 3 VMs running on this server. Right, so I'm going to go across to this server here and look at the VMs that we've got running here. We can see here at the top, one of my favorite VMs here is Bataseria, which is a retro gaming distro.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Don't have to explain it.
this has got a very huge VDisk, and when you do updates to this, you know, sometimes things can go wrong updating Bataseria, so it's really nice to be able to take a snapshot of it. So if I upgrade it and something goes wrong, I can just go back on my old snapshot and go back to where I was. So to do a snapshot, all you do is just click Create Snapshot here. And just give it a name. I'm going to call it July the 4th for today's date. And we can do 2 different types of snapshot. We can do a native file system snapshot because my VDisks are on ZFS underlying storage. So if I was to check that, it will basically just make a ZFS snapshot of that. But if you don't have ZFS, you can just have that unchecked, or if you don't want to use that type of snapshot, and it will use a QEMU external snapshot.
Something you showed on your video actually was pretty intriguing. You had, I think it was a Windows virtual machine running, and you played a video, I think it was in VLC, because we all use VLC, WinRAR VLC. But you were showing that the snapshot creation there was actually memory allocation when it was in use, so it could actually be restored. So, I mean, how does that go about?
So you'll only see that if the VM is actually running, like this one here, the Pop! OS one here. If I click onto this and we go to snapshot on this one, because it's running, we've got the option of doing what's called a memory dump. I'm not going to do it on this one. Like I said, it's only my my screensaver behind. But what it will do is it just, as well as making a snapshot of the underlying kind of file system of the VM, the VDisk, it will also dump the contents of the RAM into like a separate file of that snapshot. So when you restore it, it will have whatever was running in the VM at the time. So if you were playing a video file, that video file will be playing from the point where you created that snapshot with the memory dump. If you had an open Excel file, when you restore it, that Excel file will still be open at the same point. So it basically just makes a proper kind of frozen in time snapshot.
Up to the second.
It's very, very cool in my opinion. Yeah.
And
really, really nice.
the virtual machine creation tool as well is quite. I mean, again, they've definitely rejigged a lot of the. I know there's options. Obviously, GPU support and GPU support was improved, but just creating VMs now, there's a lot more customization to it now in 7. That was one of the first things I looked into.
So with creating a VM, we've just got so much more things we can do. If we scroll down to the bottom here and I click on to add VM, in fact, I'm going to go across to a different server for this. Robbie, I'm going to go across to Serenity
I'm just riddled in jealousy how many of these servers you've got knitted together, frankly. Talking to someone that, you know, has about 6 different NAS OSs running in one environment, which I think a lot of users would agree, security and attack vector-wise is a nightmare. But just watching all of those via that single portal on that top bar there, I'm slathering at the lips, frankly.
So let's go across to the VMs tab here, and we'll look at the VMs here. So if I was going to add a new VM, Windows 11, for example, here.
Such a wonderful layout as well. Sorry, just to interrupt you real quick on that previous window, I don't think you gave enough respect to just how many VM profiles were on that previous page. Just the sheer range of them. Yeah. Again, speaking as someone who deals with a lot of VM deployment on a lot of turnkey NAS solutions, you generally find Windows, Linux, other, maybe Android-ish, which then comes under the heading of Linux. But it's just that I love that broken
that
down
thought
to
in your head as well, Robbie. Hold that thought about how many.
Oh, there's lots of room up there. I can hold it all day.
I'm going to show you something pretty cool before we start. So, going back to the VMs I'm running here, if I scroll down to say this Mac VM I've got running here, obviously there's no template for that. So what I can do is I can click Edit. And I can scroll down to the bottom here and I can click create modify template, and I can make my own template here. So
Chef's kiss.
all of my
Chef's
custom values I have for
kiss.
this are there, so I can just put Mac OS, click OK. And now when I go to add a VM, I can add a VM that's based off that template at the bottom here.
So I mean, that's container deployment levels of VM customization. It's absolutely beautiful.
It's really, really cool to be able to do that, because I prefer to use VMs using Q35 chipset for Windows, and by default, the Windows VMs on UnRAID are i440FX as default. Yeah, it doesn't take very long to change it, but if you can have a template and just have your custom settings in there,
And it works,
the GPU that you normally kind of pass through and that sort of thing, you can just make new VMs very, very easily. But
And particularly
let's go
when you
back
step
and
outside
actually have
of
a look
your
at what's new
basic
in the
bitch
template.
Windows, it's lovely.
For people that have used UnRAID before, they will know that you have a GUI to be able to add various features to the VM, and we can see it goes down a lot more than it used to. So starting at the top here, obviously name the VM just as we used to, but we also have under the CPU mode here something that says migratable, which can be turned on and off. By default in QM UK VM, this is turned on because you can migrate a virtual machine from one server to another when it's running. In UnRAID, obviously, it's a home server. We wouldn't normally be doing that. So we've got the option to actually switch this off. Why would you want to switch it off? You'll get slightly better performance. So without having the overhead of it, keeping that kind of like awareness of the state to be able to migrate will give you better performance. So it's just, again, another choice. Scrolling down a little bit down here, like I was saying earlier, the machine types here, we've got i440FX and Q35 as we did before. And let's go down. One thing I really like is when you add a graphics card now. So if I was to add, say, this AMD graphics card, when you add the graphics card and then the sound counterpart of it here, by default, it adds these as almost like they're different PCIe devices, unless you choose them to be multifunction, which basically makes them, to the guest, appear as they're just one device like they are in real life. Because obviously when you plug a graphics card in to a normal PC, it is just one PCIe slot it takes up. It doesn't take up two. So previously, if you wanted to make it appear to the guest operating system that it was just one device, you had to edit the XML to do so. Now it can be just turned on and off from here, which is really nice. Why do you want to do that? Better compatibility and better performance with a pass-through GPU. So a pretty cool function to have.
I just love the level of customization. I know I'm being very repetitious here, but the idea, for example, that you create that sweet spot VM that is perfect. Like, I kind of alluded to it earlier on, if you're going to run some basic bitch Windows 11 image you've downloaded with that 30-day, this isn't genuine thing on the bottom right. Sometimes you want those preset parameters to be tweaked. When you find that perfect one, just the sheer level of customization here, I'd love to know if that whole idea to save the profile came first in development or last, because it's quite nice to be able to create that perfectly bespoke, particularly when you're running a larger server that's got loads of virtual threads on that CPU, to know that you're being as efficient as possible. I love that. I like that level of customization. It's going to be quite intimidating to some users, but I still love it.
Yeah. Scrolling down here, network models we've got a bunch of different virtual network adapters we can choose. For most people, you'd just stick to the default, but if you're running older OSs, you might want to emulate various different network adapters. And then sort of scrolling down here, some of my favorite parts here is the QEMU command line part here, where we can add things in. previously, to do this, you had to go across and go to Form View, and you'd have to know how to edit the
Terminal
XML to
level.
put things in here. And you would put things in here, and then if you came back to the GUI mode and made a change, it would always strip it out. So it was incredibly difficult for users who had put custom XML in to then come and say they want to add one extra core to a GPU. They'd click apply and that would go. Well, it doesn't go anymore. Whatever you put in here will just stay here. I'm going to switch to another VM to show you one where I've got some custom XML in there. I'm going to go to this Windows 98 one here.
Oh,
So if I
Windows
scroll
98.
down in the Windows 98 VM, you can see here I've got this QEMU command line here that just tells it it's a Pentium 3. And we can also do something called QEMU overrides, which basically we can kind of pass things through to QEMU that doesn't fit in the libvirt XML schema. So what I've done here is put this little bit of code in, which basically allows GPU pass-through when using CBIOS, because it broke a few years ago being able to do that. We always used to be able to, in earlier versions of UnRAID and earlier versions of QEMU KVM, better pass through a GPU with CBIOS, but you always would get a black screen, and the only way to actually overcome that is by putting in this little, sort of 6 lines of code here. And before we were able to do this, it just would not stay in the XML. Even if you put it in going this way, it wouldn't stay. And just talking of up here, we've got inline XML for people that like to kind of see what happens when you make changes and wonder under the hood what's happening. If we click inline XML here, you can actually see the actual code of the XML next to it. So for instance, if I was to just change the MAC address here of this one, we can see the kind of changes it does in the XML.
It's quite nice, really, because
quite a nice thing, if you kind of wonder what happens when you're doing things.
Well, I just think it's quite nice when you're creating two very similar VMs, and one of them is clearly being more efficient, or not hitting hurdles that another one is. Or I just like the idea of being able to get that information if I want it. I like that that's not the default view. I like the fact that I can flick in and out of that if I choose. But I mean, like, for example, going through the notes, I was trying to see if we've covered what I believe to be the best part of UnRAID 7. And I saw mention on there of the integrated file manager. And is that a thing now? There's integrated file management? You don't need to stick it.
We've had the file manager in UnRAID for a while, but as a plugin, it's now integrated straight into the system. Just while I'm here, Robbie, I'm going to show you another little thing in the VM here. The primary vDisk here, you have the option to basically tell the guest that it's an SSD. So if your storage is on an SSD and you want the actual operating system to, report that it is an SSD, you can actually do that now. But going to the file manager, for instance, if I go to, say, the disks here, and let's go to, click on here, we can see, basically, we can just go through, and the file manager's built in, and we can look at the size of things.
Nice. With the Action tab on the right, this is something I didn't explore enough, actually. When you're looking at an individual file, the Action tab on the right, what does that display?
So the Action tab, basically, we've
nice,
got
contextual, beautiful.
These things. But another thing you can actually do that some people miss sometimes is, let's swap to another server where it's got more files on.
People are loving this little tour of your setup, by the way. This is almost a video in itself. It's quite nice. We're just sort of walking through the annals of your servers here.
So, for instance, coming here, you can just go onto here and right click and you get the action as well on the actual, so you don't have to go across to here. So if I wanted to kind of rename this, I can come here.
I was going to say, please don't knacker that.
Rename it.
I'm assuming, is that a ROM disk?
It's the whole hard drive of
so it's the whole thing.
VM.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's a 2 terabyte virtual disk image. And that is on this ZFS pool here, which is actually a dangerous ZFS pool because it's striped, so there's no redundancy. I wanted to just make it 4 terabytes. I didn't have as many NVMe slots in this server as I'd like. So what I actually do is I have the ZFS replication replicate the data from here to this larger
Nice.
ZFS drive that's actually in the UnRAID array. So the good thing about the UnRAID array is you can have any file system of each disk in the array. So this ZFS drive here is not a traditional Z pool as people think, but it's a single drive ZFS disk. But it is actually backed up by the parity of the UnRAID array. So
I was going to say, I mean, we could make this video 10 times longer if we could talk about micro stuff, the quick power on, power off, the way smart and temp information is displayed. They're all little things I think a lot of users are going to get to enjoy. I mean, I'm hoping to do another video with you soon based on some observations I had last year about UnRAID, and maybe we'll get round to that, and hopefully that will make, when you correct me on some of those things, quite interesting. But, I mean, moving forward into when UnRAID 7 eventually rolls out, because I know it's technically not 7, isn't it? It's like UnRAID 6. I think you're running a very current...
The actual public beta is 7.1, I believe, now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because is there any features that are still on the drawing board that you're aware of right now, or are we looking at... I know we're not really looking at a release
I think
candidate,
what we're going
but
to
is
see
there
now
any...
is we're going to see this, the main concentration of work is just getting this out into the stable form, and then throughout 7's life, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3 and onwards, then additional features will be added in. What they are, I don't know, but for the moment, the focus is just getting this stable and getting it out to the public.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll probably wrap things up there. As I say, we have got another video or two coming up soon with Ed. One of them, he's issued me a challenge. I can't wait to tell you guys about that one. God, I can't believe that happened. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. Again, there are links to his full breakdown of UnRAID 7. It goes into even more detail, Ed, there, alongside his music video, his debut. It's him and Taylor Swift these days, linked below. But thank you so much for joining us on the channel again, Ed. Always a pleasure to have you on. And there's links below to the UnRAID 7 beta, a lot of the change notes there and some of the forum listings. But thank you so much for watching. Thanks for joining us, Ed. And we'll see you on the next video.
Thank you.